everyone, welcome back to the channel where today we're going to be taking another look at the Monsterjager. And the reason we're taking another look at this thing is that I am recording this on the Sunday that follows the Tuesday release of this tank. So what's that? 5 days? Roughly 5 days? So this tank hasn't been in the game for a week yet as of this recording. But I don't think it's a stretch. I don't think it's wrong to say that this tank is having a noticeable impact on Era 2. And when I say noticeable impact, I mean there is a tank showing up in the MVP screens consistently doing relatively high damage on a consistent basis, and it is the Jaeger. So I think what I said in my review of this thing was that it was not good for the state of Era 2, not healthy. But that's just my take on it. So I think it's important for wargaming to know not just what I think, but also what you think. So let's just go through a couple of comments from my Jaeger review. As of this recording, there are 90 comments on that video, so I'm not going to read them all. But let's just go through a couple of them and see what you guys say. So, Star Doge went against 7 of these in a match earlier. We went 0 and 13, absolutely swept. Yeah, that is believable. 2 of these things working together is tough to handle, but 7, that's a lot. Gallant Prime 3425, Wargaming nerfs a whole group of missile tanks because not realistic and shotgun complaints. Kind of, yeah, that's kind of the reason. Even when several were not shotgun tanks. True. Wargaming then proceeds to add completely imaginary tank that does the same shotgun gameplay. Wargaming manipulates to sell tanks. Okay, so there's quite a lot in that comment to unpack, but there's more comments on that same line. So, Brian, they basically added minimum arm distance and now are making you pay for the Raketen Panzer for what the Raketen Panzer used to be. Thanks, Wargaming. Kingdom Hopemin. Era 2 is a pain with these things flying around. Looks like I'm back to Era 1. Seems ridiculous that Wargaming stopped ATGMs from shotgunning and then they released this. Unbelievable but predictable. Okay, alright, so there's 3 comments there on 3 comments making reference to the minimum arm distance. Alright. Valdera, I think that's how you say that. Only just encountered this thing yesterday a handful of times in my Conqueror and Bagel Panzer, and I had no idea what was smashing the defecation out of me. I think this is what we'll put there, or the poo out of me. In my opinion, this just goes over the top and is ridiculous. You have no time to react when the volley hits you, and you can't see what's going on when the pounding is you can't see where the pounding is coming from. Yeah, it is overwhelming when this thing goes off in your face. Roguish Hound, the fact that its rockets have no minimum arm distance is stupid. I just started Cold War again and thought it was much better. This tank just screwed it up. Okay, minimum arm distance again. Bagel Dog 5000, HE and the Armadillo shreds them pretty well. It's always nice to have a new farm project. And yes, I get where you're coming from with that comment. I know exactly where you're coming from with that. But I'll address that a little bit later. So, you can't shotgun with missiles, but you can do this. Freddy says that. Stormfire, and this is exactly why World of Tanks is pay to win. Ouch. Corey, they fix missiles and then this crap. I'm about done. Okay, alright. Jerry, this will wreck Era 2 for a lot of people. Unnecessary. It will be like Era 3 was. I hope and pray this does not go any further and will creep into Era 1. I agree with you. I really don't want this to creep into Era 1 because at the moment I think Era 1 is, despite Era 1 being the new player era, I find Era 1 to be the most tactical of all eras. So let's just go back, take a step back, and go over the feedback from you guys. So I'd say the number one thing here is the minimum arm distance. And I know others have said, oh, well, that doesn't apply because they're just rockets. They're not guided. They're not guided missiles. They're just rockets. And yeah, that is true, but that's dismissing the point that people are making. It's not about the fact that it's guided or unguided. The point is that the ATGM change was introduced to balance era 2 and era 3. That's why it was introduced. It's one of the reasons, not the only reason. That's one of the reasons why it was introduced. And that is the key thing that I noticed with the minimum arm distance. And I made mention of this in one of my previous videos about the minimum arm distance. And I mentioned that it slowed the game down. It slowed the pace of the game down. People aren't rushing. You still get games where people rush, but it slowed the game down. The game is more tactical now, and it's stopping this just mindless YOLO in at 90 kilometers an hour, dump 1200 alpha with an ATGM, and then shoot off, and the heavy, medium, whatever it is that you were targeting is just absolutely helpless. The minimum arm distance was introduced, and stopping that gameplay style is one of the effects that change had, and that was a very positive change on the game. I don't think anyone would argue with that. So the point that this thing is now just simply doing exactly what Wargaming stopped ATGMs doing, that is a valid point. That is an understandable point. So I'm not going to say to you guys, oh no, it's fine. I don't think it is, but I will get to why I don't think it is a little bit later when I talk about my solutions. So the next comment here, HE and the Armadillo shreds it pretty well. Yes, that is probably true. That is very likely true. But I would say if the solution to a particular tank is for your tank to have a rapid fire high explosive slinger, if that is the solution to the problem, that's a very niche solution that not everybody's got. And it might work very, very well for the Armadillo. Losing all my hit points there. GG. That might work very well for the Armadillo, but I don't think the solution to this problem should be, first of all, play a tank that you might not have, and secondly, load it with an ammunition type that you won't fire at any other tank in the game other than this one. That to me sounds like a very niche solution that is not going to be widely available to many players. It will work, you're not wrong. This thing doesn't have much armor, you're not wrong. But I don't think that is the best or most widely available solution to this issue. Alright, the next one that was mentioned here is that it's pay to win, Wargaming manipulating tanks, the mechanics, the design. I know for a fact that Wargaming does not do that. The individuals responsible for developing this game do not deliberately put in things like pay to win tanks. It doesn't deliberately happen that way. What I think is happening here is something similar to what we've seen before. This is the first unguided rocket-only vehicle in the game. Prior to this one, we had the Hydra, but that's a variant of a Magak 3, Magak 5, I think one of them, and it's got the unguided rocket pods on the side of the turret. But this is the first time we've had a rocket-only vehicle. And the first of anything is always a bit experimental. You can plan for an experiment, but until you actually run it, you don't know what's going to happen. You have no idea. I mean, the results might be what you expect. They might not be what you expect. They might exceed expectations. And I think what's happened with this vehicle is it's exceeding expectations. Not because Wargaming deliberately nerfed ATGMs and now they've said, all right, now we're going to put this in and we're going to get money. Like, I understand why the community could see it that way. I with this, with the information that is available to the community side, I totally get why you would think that. I get it. I absolutely get it. But there is another side that is not so visible to the community, and that is not really what's happened. That's not what's happening here. This is an experiment that has exceeded expectations, and what needs to happen is some adjustments need to be made, I would say. So let's now get on to what I think needs to happen with this. So, two things. As you can see right now, I've got great concealment. That 4-11 is in the cap. He's doing the right thing, admittedly. But he has no idea that I'm here. And that's a heavy hit there. I think this thing needs a slight concealment nerf. Because, like, who was it that said? Somebody here. I think it was Valdera. Yeah, in his Conqueror and Bagel Panzer. This thing hits you out of nowhere, and you've got no time to prepare whatsoever. And really, that's kind of the same issue that we've had with the Weasel. It can show up out of nowhere, it can smack you really, really hard, and before you even know what's happened, it's disappeared again. I didn't need to fire quite so much there, because I'm now down to my last rocket, but hey, it is what it is. So, I think this thing needs a slight concealment nerf. There's nothing wrong with the speed of it, I think. There's nothing wrong with the still concealment of it. It is a tank destroyer after all. It's supposed to have great still concealment. But I think this thing needs to have its concealment plume more when it's moving. Because really, you're not going to rush in. Well, the reason it can rush around right now is because its concealment doesn't plume that much. If you could see this thing coming from, I don't know, make it in line with the Sheridan, which I believe is 180 meters, I think. If you could see this thing coming, then you'd have time to prepare, you'd have time to maneuver, you'd have time to angle, or whatever it is you want to do. You know, your arse end might be facing it, you'd have time to rotate your hull and have your front armor facing towards it. It's that sort of thing that you want some preparedness, you want some prepare time. And I think the Sheridan is a good baseline to base this thing off of, because the Sheridan has concealment, but it doesn't have so much concealment that it can just pop up out of nowhere and boom, you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? I think the concealment needs a slight tweak. The other thing that I think needs a slight tweak is the interclip reload time. There's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with having 1800 alpha in a clip. Not many tanks have that kind of alpha. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But being able to dump that in 2 seconds, I believe that's the problem. I think this thing needs to be reeled in slightly. I think the clip unload time needs to be dialed back a little bit. And I would say it's at 2 seconds right now. I think if this thing were to be maybe double that, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, I think that might make this a far more tactical vehicle, because right now the concealment and the clip unload time mean that you can YOLO in, unload in 2 seconds, and get out relatively unseen. You can get within, well, if you stay beyond 65 meters, 64 meters, you won't be detected while moving until you fire. If you could be detected from further away, people would have more time to prepare. And you wouldn't be able to just blat them and just go bleh with 1800. I think that's what needs to happen with this vehicle. So that is my take on what needs to be happening with the Monsterjager. Because right now, it is a vehicle that absolutely dominates. Absolutely dominates. And this game that you've seen in the background here is the best game I've had. As you can see, I'm out of ammunition. And I couldn't win, so my solution was, well, if I can't win, then I will force the draw. Which is an unusual result. in this game. You don't see draws too often. But there we go, MVP, 8,749 damage, which isn't too bad in my opinion. That's a pretty good result. 4,993 assists. So combined, that's, the maths in my head is terrible. What's that, roughly 13,000 combined? 5 kills. That was a pretty good game. So there you go, guys. That is all I've got for this video. If you've got other suggestions on how to adjust this vehicle, let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, if not a dislike. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.